The beads on my neck rattled as though they wanted to run away. Outside, women were shouting, ululating, their spoons clashing on iron pots like war drums. But inside this room, the air was colder than harmattan. The fat chief, the one with the belly that spoke of food and power, was gone. In his place stood another man. Lean. Sharp. His presence exuded coldness, like ice frost creeping into my bones. When his hand gripped my wrist, iron tight, I knew I had not been sold to the man the drums celebrated. I had been given to a shadow. Lagos does not pity the poor. Our compound was always noisy, babies crying, lovers quarreling, neighbors fighting over water. But beneath the noise was the ache of hunger. Buckets lined the corridor, empty. My siblings and I went to bed with hollow stomachs that growled louder than the rats in the ceiling. That morning we had only Gary soaked in water. I pushed my portion toward Ngozi, my little sister, pretending my throat was full. But it wasn't. Hunger had teeth, and it bit at me from inside, sharp and merciless. I swallowed air and smiled like a fool. Hunger is a wicked landlord, you see. It mocks your pride and collects rent straight from your body. So when Chief Balagan arrived, fat as a yam barn, laughter spilling from his round belly, the air of the compound shifted. Sacks of rice followed him, bottles of palm oil gleamed like captured sunlight, and 2 goats bleated outside as though they too knew the bargain being struck. Women clapped, tongues clicking. Mama Sod whispered to my mother, "Ifioma, your luck has come." Oh. I heard it. Everyone heard it. I watched him lower himself onto our wooden chair, the wood groaning under his weight. His agbada rustled, his fingers thick with rings. He smiled like he had the power to feed the whole world. "A woman like you deserves peace," he said to my mother, his voice slow, dripping like palm oil. "Let me take your daughter. I will give her comfort, not hunger." My mother's eyes darted to me, then back to him. I saw her chest rise and fall, heavy. She thought of the rent collector. She thought of Ngozi's thin arms. She thought of how the market women laughed at her debts. And then she smiled, the kind of smile that hides a wound. "Chief, you are a man of honor. We will accept." My heart sank into my stomach. Nobody asked if I agreed. Why would they? A daughter's silence is cheaper than a bag of rice. The compound erupted with ululations. Women danced, children shouted, men clapped. They saw salvation, I felt chains. Coral beads were pressed around my wrists, my neck, my ankles. They clinked like shackles each time I moved. That night, as the noise died down and the goats bleated in the dark, I lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling. My mother's purse, fat with naira notes, lay under her pillow. She slept with the smile of a woman who thought she had conquered hunger. But me? My chest felt like a calabash filled with stones. Somewhere in my spirit, I heard a whisper, "This bargain carries a shadow you cannot see yet." The day they paid my bride price, the compound turned into a noisy carnival. Women ululated until their throats turned dry, spoons clanged against basins, and children ran barefoot across the corridor. The 2 goats tied near the mango tree bleated as if they too were witnesses to my fate. Bags of rice stood tall in my mother's room, and bottles of palm oil lined the wall like soldiers keeping guard. Poverty, for one day, was chased out by the scent of plenty. I watched from the corner, my wrists heavy with coral beads, my head wrapped in a geli too tight for comfort. The women called me beautiful, the kind that would make any man proud. But to me, their words were like pepper rubbed into my eyes. Beauty meant nothing when you were being sold like smoked fish in the market. My mother sat proudly on the mat, her wrapper tied neatly, her face painted with pride she had not worn in years. In her lap sat a swollen purse filled with naira notes. She caressed it like a newborn baby, smiling as neighbors congratulated her. Mama Sada's voice rose above the rest, "Ifioma, you have saved your family. Some mothers complain, but you are wise." The others clapped, nodding, their eyes already measuring what part of the rice they might beg for later. And me? I smiled too, but it was the kind of smile that hides a sob. My lips curved, but my chest was full of stones. Nobody asked me if I wanted this life. Nobody even looked into my eyes. Daughters are never asked. When the drumming started, the ground trembled. Men clapped, women danced, children copied the steps with joy. Chief Balagan rose, sweat glistening on his fat forehead, his agbada swaying as if the cloth itself bowed to him. He reached for my hand, slow and ceremonial, the way fat men moved when they wanted the world to see their power. The compound roared in approval. But as his hand brushed mine, I felt a chill, not from him, but from the shadow behind him. Lean, silent, sharp-eyed, the other man leaned against the wall, watching me like a hawk watching a chicken. Nobody noticed him. Nobody clapped for him. But my heart noticed. My heart quaked. His presence exuded coldness, like frost spreading across my bones. And though I didn't yet know his name, I felt it in my spirit, this man carried my true fate. That night, when the compound went quiet, I lay awake listening to the distant hum of a generator, the scattered laughter of drunk men fading into the dark. My mother hummed softly as she hid the purse of money beneath her pillow. She whispered to herself, "My children will not sleep hungry again." I wanted to cry out, "Mama, I am the food you traded for that sleep." But my lips stayed sealed. Silence had become my dowry. The night after the wedding felt heavier than iron. The compound still buzzed with the aftertaste of celebration. Drunk men staggering home, women whispering gossip, the goats bleating in the dark. I was led into a room where my new life was supposed to begin. My beads clinked against each other like frightened teeth. I expected to find the fat chief waiting, his body filling the room, his agbada collapsed in a corner. But when the door closed, the air shifted. On the chair by the bed sat another man. Lean. Sharp. His shadow stretched long on the wall, as if even the lantern feared him. His eyes caught mine, cold, piercing, and I felt as if frost had crept into my veins. My lips parted. My voice barely rose. Where is the chief?" He stood, slow, deliberate, each movement like a blade slicing the silence. "The chief was only a door," he said, his voice low and steady. "I am the one who opened it. From today, you are mine." His hand gripped my wrist, not fat and soft, but iron and bone. The beads rattled, but this time they didn't sound like ornaments. They sounded like chains. Outside, the compound still believed I belonged to Balagan. Women sang late into the night, children mimicked the drumming. No one knew that behind closed doors, the fatness had vanished, and in its place was Oba, the lean shadow who had been watching me all along. In the days that followed, I learned his silence was sharper than any insult. He moved like a man carrying storms in his chest. He ate little, spoke little, but his eyes followed everything. When he did speak, his words were measured, cutting, leaving no room for softness. His presence exuded coldness, the kind that made your bones ache even in Lagos heat. I tried to cry to my mother, but each time I saw her face, lit with pride and relief, my lips sealed. She shared rice with neighbors, gave palm oil to friends, and said, "My daughter is a wife of a great man." She did not see the shadows under my eyes. Or maybe she saw and chose silence too. The neighbors began to whisper. Mama Saad told the other women, "Did you notice how quickly the chief disappeared? Ha! Something is not straight here." But gossip was smoke, it filled the air, then vanished. Nobody asked me. Nobody asked the truth. At night, I lay on the mat in the room Oba kept for me. The walls felt too close, the air too heavy. I stared at the ceiling, wondering if my life would always feel like this, sold under false light, swallowed by silence. Sometimes, when Oba thought I wasn't looking, his eyes softened, almost like someone carrying a wound too deep to name. But each time, he blinked it away, returning to his frost. And I wondered which was the mask, the fat man who fooled us all, or the lean one who wore cruelty like a second skin. The house was bigger than anything I had ever seen. Its gates stood tall like iron soldiers, its walls painted in colors that mocked the dust of my mother's compound. Chandeliers dangled from the ceilings, their light too bright, too sharp, making me feel smaller with every step. Servants moved quietly, carrying trays and whispering among themselves. Yet for all its size, the house felt colder than harmattan nights. Oba's stepmother was the first to meet me. She looked me up and down the way women in the market examined yam, tapping, judging, searching for rot. "So this is the wife," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut skin. "A girl from a poor compound, dragged in here to sit where she does not belong." She turned away before I could speak, her perfume lingering in the air like mockery. The days in that house bled into each other. I wore silence like a second wrapper, watching, listening, waiting. Oba was as distant as ever, his presence exuding frost. He walked through corridors without looking at me, spoke in clipped words, carried himself like a stranger in his own home. But sometimes, in fleeting moments, I caught him watching me, his eyes dark with something I could not name. It was the stepbrother who broke the silence. One evening, when Oba was away, he cornered me near the staircase. His smile was a crooked knife, his breath hot with drink. "You are wasted on my brother," he whispered, his hand reaching for my waist. My heart slammed against my ribs, my beads clinked like alarm bells. I pushed him, my voice cracking as I said no. But he laughed, grabbing harder. The commotion drew the stepmother. She appeared at the top of the stairs, her eyes narrowing. For one breath, I thought she would defend me. Instead, her words fell like stones. "You shameless girl," she hissed. "How dare you accuse my son of such things? You think because you came from hunger, you can scatter this house with lies?" Her voice echoed through the hall, and the servants lowered their eyes. Tears stung my face, but I swallowed them. In that house, my truth was dust, swept away by their power. When Oba returned that night, I waited for him in the room, my heart pounding, ready to tell him everything. But when I opened my mouth, his eyes froze me. He listened, his face unreadable, colder than frost. He said nothing, only stared, then turned away. My chest caved in. So he did not care. He was just like them. But later that night, I heard raised voices in the east wing. The stepbrothers' cries, muffled and sharp. A door slammed. Silence followed. Oba returned much later, his face expressionless, his knuckles bruised. He did not look at me, not once. But as he walked past, I felt it, a storm hidden beneath his frost. I lay on the bed, trembling. In that moment, I did not know who Oba truly was, the cold shadow who had claimed me, or the silent shield I was too afraid to believe in. Days in that mansion felt like years. I walked through long corridors lined with pictures of men in suits, none of them smiling, all of them staring as if I was an intruder. Servants obeyed Oba's stepmother with their eyes lowered, but when they passed me, their whispers cut like knives. "She is not fit, she is from nothing." Their words clung to me like dust I could not shake. Oba remained a storm contained in human skin. His presence exuded coldness, he moved through rooms like frost, chilling the air with silence. When he did speak, his voice was low, heavy, never wasting a word. To me, he was the man who stole my choice, the shadow who turned my beads into shackles. Yet strange things began to happen. One morning, I overheard the servants whispering that school fees for my siblings had been paid, anonymously. Another time, when a house guard mocked me for being the compound bride, Oba appeared suddenly, his eyes like fire. The guard never mocked me again. And once, when the stepmother tried to belittle me at the dinner table, Oba cut her short with a stare so sharp it silenced the whole room. But then he turned back to me, face blank, voice cold, as if nothing had happened. I could not understand him. Was he my jailer, or my shield? The night of truth came like a storm. We argued, my voice breaking after weeks of silence. Why do you hate me? I cried, my chest shaking. Why bring me here if all you want is to bury me in your frost? Oba stared at me for a long time, the room thick with silence. Then he spoke, his voice lower than ever. You think I chose this? You think I wanted to drag a stranger into my storm? His fists clenched, his knuckles white. And then it spilled out. His mother dead when he was 10. A stepmother who carved bitterness into his childhood. A father who said he would hand the company, the empire, to the stepbrother unless Oba married quickly, respectably. Balagan is my uncle, he said, his voice breaking like glass. He was my mask, my fat shield. If I came myself, the marriage would have been destroyed before it began. I stood frozen, my breath caught between disbelief and pity. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time his eyes were not frost, but rain. Wounded rain. Cruelty is easier than weakness, he whispered. If I am hard, no one can use me. Not even you. His words cut deeper than any insult. I saw him then, not just as the man who had chained me, but as a boy trapped in shadows that grew into walls. And yet, the pain he carried did not erase mine. I was still the girl sold under false light, the daughter whose silence was bartered for rice. That night, as I lay awake, I wondered which weighed heavier, his scars, or mine. It was the 6th month when my silence finally cracked. I returned to the compound with Oba, the mansion's shadows still clinging to me like cobwebs. Neighbors crowded to greet us, their tongues dripping with gossip. But I walked straight into my mother's room, the beads rattling on my neck like angry spirits. She was sitting on her mat, her hands busy counting the last of Balagan's money. Her face lit when she saw me, but my chest was already burning. The words tore out of me before I could stop them. Mama, you sold me to a ghost. Her hands froze. The notes slipped from her fingers and scattered on the floor like dry leaves. She looked up at me, her eyes wet, her lips trembling. Amara, my daughter, I only wanted you to live better than I did. Hunger was eating us alive. What choice did I have? I felt heat rise in my chest, the kind of heat that blinds. And what of my life? What of my breath? You thought his fat belly would shelter me, but you handed me to the frost standing behind him. My voice cracked, my knees buckled. For the first time, the cry I had buried for months burst free, a sound raw enough to shake the compound. Outside, neighbors stirred. Mama Sada's sharp whisper cut the silence, and, so the chief was not the husband after all. Their murmurs swelled, gossip spilling like smoke, wrapping the compound in my pain. My mother covered her face with her wrapper, her body shaking. A woman in Lagos does not choose, my daughter. The world chooses for her. I thought I was saving us. Instead, I buried you. It was then Oba stepped forward. The compound fell quiet, every eye turning. He stood tall, his presence still exuding coldness, but his eyes carried rain. He looked at me, then at my mother. Enough, he said, his voice low but sharp. She is not meet to be traded. She is my wife. And from today, no one will silence her again. Not in this house, not in mine. For a moment, even the goats outside held their breath. I turned to him, searching his face for mockery. But there was none. The frost was still there, yes, but behind it, I saw something else. Respect. A fragile, stubborn respect. Perhaps even love, though neither of us dared name it. The compound buzzed again, neighbors whispering, measuring this new twist. But for me, the noise faded. My tears ran, but they no longer felt like chains. They felt like release. Later, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the cracked walls, Baba Chaik, the old watchman, muttered a proverb under his breath. The shadow of a tree may hide a man, but it cannot hide the sun. For the first time in months, I believed him. My dear viewers, what lessons did you pick from this thrilling tale? Fire up the comment section.